Round 4. A different network hosts a smaller group of Republican candidates in Milwaukee tonight. Resist temptation. The Holy Father urges bishops in Florence to avoid seeking power, prestige, and money. Elder statesman. Helmut Schmidt, who led West Germany through turbulent times, dies at age 96. And cooking for Christ. We talk with a religious sister who wins 10 grand on the Food Network's Chopped. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, November 10th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. GOP presidential hopefuls for the 4th time will debate tonight. The Fox Business debate looks different than the others, with only 8 candidates on the main stage in Milwaukee. Catherine Zeltner has more.
This is a strange election, isn't it? Man.
Donald Trump, campaigning before the debate, gets a few chuckles by bringing up the controversy surrounding his biggest rival.
You stab somebody, and the newspapers say you didn't do it. And you said, yes, I did it. And they said you didn't do it. If they said I didn't do it, I'd be so happy.
The questions about Ben Carson's past come with the intense media scrutiny facing a frontrunner. And he's bashing the media in return.
Talking to the wrong people, not going to like Wilson Junior High School where the lock incident occurred, but talking to other people and saying, see, we can't. I mean, this is just stupid.
After the bashing the CNBC moderators took after the last debate, a lot of eyes will be on its competition as Fox Business hosts tonight's debate.
What we have to do as moderators is make sure we're asking the adult kind of questions without any agenda, but without doing so snidely.
For the first time, only 8 candidates will be in the main debate, as Mike Huckabee and Governor Chris Christie are relegated to the undercard debate with Rick Santorum and Governor Bobby Jindal. Senator Lindsey Graham and George Pataki, due to their low poll numbers, have been dropped from the debates entirely. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. Gabby Morrongiello is political reporter for the Washington Examiner. The debate is business-focused. Does that give Trump an advantage given his business background?
It certainly does, because Trump has arguably the most private sector experience of any candidate on the stage tonight, with the exception of Carly Fiorina, perhaps. But again, Fox Business has adjusted its rules to allow candidates to have more time to respond, and that means that Trump is going to have to go further in depth with his policies and how he plans to protect American businesses and recover the economy, and that could prove to be difficult for him since he's failed to offer much substance in past debates.
There's been so much focus on the autobiography of Dr. Ben Carson. How do you think that plays into the debate tonight?
Well, if anybody is going to bring that up, it's likely to be Donald Trump, because Ben Carson is currently the biggest threat to him as the frontrunner. But again, that wouldn't be wise for him to do, because right now what we've seen regarding these claims that that Carson has fabricated some of these experiences, some of these stories, is Politico, the publication, discussing his admission to West Point and then retracting part of that story. This is largely still being corroborated by the media, so for any candidate to bring it up as a line of attack would just not be wise at this point.
Do you see this debate as make it or break it for any of these candidates?
I would say this is make it or break it for Carly Fiorina, because there is so much time between this debate and the next debate, and in the last gap between the second and third debate, we saw her poll numbers decline tremendously. So if she is not able to deliver a standout performance and then continue to keep that momentum going, it could be make or break for her campaign, particularly because she hasn't seen some of the levels of fundraising as the other candidates like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and Donald Trump, even with his small dollar donations.
Do you see any showdowns going on maybe between Cruz and Rubio, both of them very strong in the last debate?
Absolutely. Cruz and Rubio is a pair to look out for, particularly because they will be, are likely to be, the 2 remaining candidates at the finish line if Ben Carson and Donald Trump don't make it and they're not able to, secure the vote because of their lack of political experience. And even Bush and Rubio, that's something that we saw in the last debate, and it could certainly come out again tonight, but it again wouldn't be wise for Jeb Bush to go after Marco Rubio, because he did it last time and he suffered tremendously in the polls because of it. And this is a business-centric debate, so really he should be focusing on promoting his record and the economic leap that we saw in Florida when he was governor.
We'll see who prevails tonight. Gabby Morrongiello with the Washington Examiner. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Congress passes a $607 billion defense budget that moves or bans moving Guantanamo Bay detainees to the U.S. Now, President Obama has been trying to do that since he started his first term. The president is expected to sign this bill in spite of that provision that he doesn't agree with. And the Obama administration will ask the Supreme Court to weigh in on the president's plan to shield millions of illegal immigrants from deportation. The Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals Monday upheld a Texas-based federal judge's injunction blocking the president's plan. 26 states had challenged the plan in court. Republicans call it an illegal executive overreach. Dan Stein is president of the Federation of Immigration Reform, or FAIR. You're an experienced attorney in the area of immigration reform. Does the administration have a case?
Clearly, the Fifth Circuit doesn't think so. This three-judge panel, at least two of them anyway, they roundly refuted the administration's contention at every single level. The president and his administration, they were asserting they have this unlimited right to admit aliens, give them work documents without regard to the law, with what Congress said, asserting they have this discretion to just ignore the law. But they made a mistake because they went a step further and said they're not just going to ignore the law, they're going to give out work documents when they clearly had no statutory authority. The Court of Appeals said no. Now, obviously they could call for a rehearing, but they've decided to go ahead and go petition the Supreme Court. That means this is probably going to get pushed well into 2016. Maybe it'll be heard April, May, June. Maybe they get a decision in July, maybe later. You know, it's going to change the whole campaign, right? Because suddenly the Republican candidates have all this political cover now to denounce what the president has done. You have Hillary Clinton and you have Bernie Sanders, who are going like a freight train down the track 1,000 miles an hour. They're going to go bigger than the president. Well, all of a sudden now Donald Trump and Ben Carter, they could all say, hey, you know, this is illegal. We've got a federal court that's saying this now. It's been affirmed by an appeals court. So it's a huge game changer for this campaign.
You know, let's back up into the issue itself. Can't immigrants be seen as a resource for our nation?
Look, we can all be proud of the tradition of immigration and proud of the role that it's played in our history, but in the end, the rule of law is what ties us together as a people, right? Respect for law, cornerstone of citizenship. We're not talking about people who played by the rules and played the game properly. It's about what does it mean to be an American if you're allowed to jump the line, cheat the system, and get ahead by breaking the rules.
What's the proper way to
Proper way, of course, is to, well, you reform immigration by analyzing how did we get in this mess? Why do we have 10, 12 million people here illegally? How did it happen? Reverse engineer it and say, all right, what are the elements of state and local cooperation, interior enforcement, work security, work documents, employer sanctions, and an expeditious process so that if you break the rules, you don't get to stay and you're quickly removed. How do we put all that in place to make sure it doesn't happen again?
We'll talk about that next time. Dan Stein with FAIR. Thanks for joining us, Dan.
My pleasure.
Well, the Holy Father urges bishops to resist the temptations of power, prestige, and money as he pushes forward with his reform of the Vatican. Italians line the street as Pope Francis arrives in Florence today. Clergy and the faithful gather outside the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore.
Preferisco una chiesa accidentata, ferita e sporca.
Inside, the Pope saying he wants a church that is humble and poor, not one that is closed and sick. Francis chose to eat lunch not with the church hierarchy, but with the poor of Florence. His visit comes as the Vatican copes with the new VatiLeaks scandal. 2 new books describe the Pope's uphill battle to reform the Vatican and get a handle on its finances. Francis began his day-long visit to Tuscany with a stop in the industrial city of Prato. A garment factory fire there killed 7 Chinese workers in 2013.
È una tragedia dello sfruttamento.
Francis denouncing the inhumane conditions the illegal workers were forced to endure. Prato is home to some 40,000 Chinese immigrants, nearly half of them in Italy illegally. It's a major producer of cheap clothing made in largely unregulated factories that double as dormitories. And UK's Prime Minister David Cameron says that when it comes to Europe, less is more. He is pushing for a major overhaul of the EU ahead of a British referendum to decide Great Britain's future in the Union. Cameron says the EU must agree to giving autonomy back to member states and limit freedom of movement, a key EU principle. He wants the UK to be able to restrict benefits for European immigrants. He also seeks to exempt Great Britain from Europe's push towards an ever closer union.
The commitment in the treaty to an ever closer union is not a commitment that should apply any longer to Britain. We don't believe in it. We do not subscribe to it. We have a different vision for Europe.
Britain will hold a referendum by the end of 2017 on whether or not to leave the EU. Cameron says he wants to stay, provided he can secure the needed reforms. Meanwhile, the European Union warns of a looming humanitarian catastrophe. Tens of thousands of people are streaming into northern Europe as winter closes in. The warning comes after a meeting of the EU ministers in Brussels. They're hoping to speed up Europe's response to the refugee emergency. More than 770,000 people have arrived in the EU by sea so far this year. Moscow's ban on all flights to Egypt in the wake of a Russian plane crash will last for at least several months. The Kremlin chief of staff's announcement today deals a severe blow to Egypt's struggling tourism industry. Russian President Vladimir Putin suspended all flights to Egypt on Friday. An October 31st crash of a flight en route from Sharm el-Sheikh to St. Petersburg killed all 224 passengers and crew. U.S. and British officials cite intelligence reports indicating the plane may have been brought down by a bomb on board. Russia and Egypt say the statements are premature, but Moscow's ban on flights signals it takes the bomb serious, or the theory seriously. Michael O'Hanlon, senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, specializes in U.S. defense strategy and American foreign policy. Michael, do you believe that ISIS could have planted that bomb on the Russian jet?
Yes, I think it's entirely conceivable. Bomb making is not that complicated, unfortunately. It doesn't take that much explosive to bring down a jet, and this could have been an inside job. You know, they might not have needed to do very much to get it aboard the plane if that's in fact what happened. There could have been people at airport security who were bought off or part of the local group, the Sinai province of the Islamic State or whatever you want to call them, or an affiliated group. And so yes, there are a lot of ways in which this could happen. Could also have just been some way that security was circumvented because there were sloppy procedures at this particular airport. And so I have no trouble believing that this could easily have been an ISIL-inspired or conducted operation.
Is ISIS running free in Egypt, and where does it get its funding?
Well, ISIL appears to be prominent in the Sinai. This is the area where they've had some bombings and killings and various kinds of unrest. There's a history here of extremist jihadist groups, but of course everybody seems to want to be part of ISIL at this stage. It's the new game in town. They've got momentum politically, militarily, otherwise, and people are swearing affiliation to them. ISIL is happy to have that kind of broad support and that wide range of affiliates around many parts of the broader Middle East. And I don't know if the money comes from central ISIL. One of the things that we're seeing, I think, is really a broad community, a loosely knit community, where the fundraising is localized. But there doesn't have to be that much money to create the explosive to build a bomb to take down an airliner. You know, this could have been a device that cost less than $100 to manufacture. So there may be a broader issue of financing here, but I'm not sure it's, you know, that hard to see how a bomb could have been planted on a plane.
Michael O'Hanlon with the Brookings Institution. Thank you for your insight, Michael. We appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And the leader who guided West Germany through economic turbulence and the Cold War has died. Former German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt was 96. He led West Germany from 1974 to 1982. Schmidt went on to become an iconic elder statesman, weighing in on Germany's political debates well into his 90s. Coming up, Sister Alicia Torres will feed the hungry with thousands of dollars she won on the Food Network. And a new internet domain has been purchased by the Vatican for a very specific purpose. Today, November 10th, is the feast of Pope St. Leo the Great, Doctor of the Church. He negotiated peace with Attila the Hun, avoiding a takeover of Rome in 452. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. A Catholic sister wins $10,000 on the Food Network's cooking competition called Chopped. She will donate it to the kitchen where she dishes out joy and delicious food for the poor of Chicago. Sister Alicia Torres spoke with our Jason Calvi earlier today.
Sister Alicia, you amazed the audience and the judges last night. What's your secret?
You know, I think my secret really is that joy that comes from a relationship with the Lord.
And it's interesting because the Chicago media has been covering this story for days. How do you handle all the attention?
You know, just to keep in mind and to help myself be aware that this is about Jesus, about being a good witness, a good disciple, about being a witness to the church, and especially about bringing attention to the poor that we love and that we serve.
And you recently took your final vows in the religious order. It's a new order. How has this experience impacted your vocation?
You know, as a sister, we vow poverty, chastity, and obedience, and we give our life in service to God and the church. And so it's been very humbling for me to be in the spotlight, but to recognize that it's not for me, but it's for the gospel, to bring the message of the good news of Jesus Christ to the world.
I'm curious how your time in the soup kitchen inspired and influenced your win last night.
Sure. You know, we depend on divine providence. So literally everything that we have here, we receive as a gift. We believe God inspires countless generous individuals, parishes, schools, organizations to help us. And so we want to be good stewards of everything we receive. And sometimes we receive unusual things. Sometimes they're very basic things. But how can we take what we receive and make a delicious, healthy meal to help bring people together, but also to nourish their bodies?
And you won $10,000, and all of that money is going to go to this work. Tell us about some of the things you do every single day for the community in Humboldt Park, Chicago.
As a sister here, myself and my community, we serve the neighborhoods. We have weekly food pantries. We have senior citizen programming for children and youth. So we serve about 700 families a month and 900 youth in after school and evening programs in partnership with the Greater Chicago Food Depository and the YMCA of Metro Chicago. So we're really blessed to have these great partnerships that work together to help take care of our neighbors. And of course, as Catholics and as religious, we also want to help take care of their souls. So we have a lot of prayer services and other opportunities for people to grow in their faith, especially scripturally based.
That is so awesome, so inspiring. The episode will replay next Tuesday at 10 Eastern on the Food Network. Sister Alicia Torres of the Franciscans of the Eucharist of Chicago, we're very proud of you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
What a beautiful witness. Thank you, Sister. The Church embraces technology, especially the internet, as an effective way to spread the gospel. Well, now the Vatican brings major church institutions together online under a single domain, .Catholic. The domain is reserved for groups associated with the Holy See, dioceses, and Catholic institutions. The idea is to provide people with reliable information about the Catholic faith online. The project is still a work in progress. Msgr Paul Tighe with the Pontifical Council for Social Communications joining us from Rome tonight. So, Msgr, how will this work? So after an email address rather than .com or .org, you'd have .Catholic?
Yeah, this is a new project that's just been launched. The idea is that the traditional top-level domain names, that's the little bit that comes after the dot, can now be liberalized, and we had the possibility of acquiring a .Catholic top-level domain name. We bought it for two reasons. One, to stop anyone else buying it and creating confusion. And secondly, because we think it's a way of being able to authenticate the institutional church's presence online. So anybody who finds a website or an email address with .Catholic at the end of it will know that they're dealing with an institution that is an authentically Catholic institution, that's an institution that's recognized under canon law, that's recognized by the Universal Church and recognized also by the local diocese.
So there would be a vetting process before anybody could get the .Catholic domain?
Yeah, the first thing to say is that the .Catholic domain name is not for individuals, it's for institutions. So the ideal way we see this happening is at the second level, they will be given to dioceses around the world, and it will be given to the major religious orders. So you could have Jesuit.Catholic, you could have Birmingham.Catholic, and then it'll be up to the local ordinary or the superior of the religious order to decide which institutions can have the further domain names. And that's essentially going to follow normal canon law. So if it's an institution that's recognized by the bishop, what we call a public juridical person, then it will have the possibility of being recognized as a domain name. So you could have St. Mary's.Birmingham.Catholic, you could have a university.Jesuit, depending on the context.
But the organization wouldn't apply for this. The church will actually approach the organizations about this, right?
What we've decided to do is, rather than kind of asking people to contact us, this project will be managed now by the new Secretariat for Communications. And over the next couple of months, they'll be contacting all the bishops' conferences and all the major religious orders to explain to them how the thing will work. Then it'll be up to individual bishops and individual superiors of religious orders to decide how they would like to use this, which of their institutions they'd want to place online. But our hope is in the long term. That means that we'll have a kind of a way of organizing the Catholic presence online that reflects our canonical structures, that guarantees people who go to those sites that they are dealing with an authentically Catholic site, particularly if they want to transfer money to that site. And then in particular is also a way of ensuring that gradually we'll get a better search engine optimization, and people ask questions, they're more likely to get a Catholic site answering that question.
Very interesting development. Msgr Paul Tighe, thanks for joining us from Rome.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Up next, young Catholic activists converge on Capitol Hill lobbying for the poor. And the White Mass celebrates people with special needs, affirming their dignity. The good that we sow along our path as Christians help us to create a new and renewed humanity where no one is marginalized or discarded, where the person who serves is the greatest, and where the children and the poor are welcomed and helped. From Pope Francis at an outdoor Mass celebrated in Florence today. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Students from Jesuit schools across the country urge lawmakers to address moral issues. The Ignatian Solidarity Network estimates more than 1,000 young adults participated in Monday's Day of Advocacy on Capitol Hill. The group hopes to echo the message of Pope Francis in his recent address to Congress. Students meeting with congressional leaders discussing climate change, immigration reform, and poverty.
We want to be advocates for the poor because Catholicism in general calls us to be advocates for the poor and to be spokesperson for them.
More than 75 Catholic institutions were represented. Finally tonight, a tradition affirming the dignity of all human life. An annual Mass for the special needs community in the Archdiocese of Washington is catching on elsewhere. Wyatt Goolsby reports.
Skills and time are ours for pressing toward the goals of Christ. Fitting lyrics for the start of what's called the White Mass, a liturgy highlighting people with special needs.
The White Mass proclaims that all are needed at the altar of God and commissions us, sends us forth to be agents of this message.
All the clergy members are dressed in white, a reminder of the faithful being united in Christ through baptism. People with special needs take part, from the readings to the prayers of the faithful. Greg Ybarra, a Cameroon native who now teaches in Washington, D.C., signed the second reading. Ybarra lost his hearing due to an illness at 8 years old. He tells us the White Mass gives him a sense of renewal.
We all come together as one community of faith. We're not looking at people as just special needs, but we're human. We're looking through human eyes. We're looking at what our abilities are. We're looking through eyes of faith to see the beauty of God's creation.
Margaret Bryan agrees. She advocates for people with disabilities in the life of the church and society.
And what I try to share with people is that it's okay to ask people questions. It's okay to get to know people. In fact, that's the greatest way you can learn to help, is to ask. We're not just this terrifying person in a wheelchair. We have gifts that we would love to share.
Washington's Cardinal Donald Worrell says everyone has unique gifts that are valuable in the sight of God. 10-year-old Jessica Fasaga tells me she's happy her mother brought her to church to hear that message.
It was really, really beautiful to come.
A sign of the vibrant special needs community breathing life into the church. Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Wyatt. A beautiful story you will not see anywhere else. Until tomorrow, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night. God bless you.